Here we have the trailer coming back home with the parts, quite full. Was more stuff in the car. Seems I have some
Ja,
oil on
lägg en
the
plåt
lens.
där och upp över i sprickorna lite.
We cleaned a few things up, preparing it to be able to assemble the machine. Put some just silicone on that cracked lid, because here one of the purchased motors I just gonna rob the lid from this one, and also the sprocket, because I keep them together, the parts that have been used together. Looked a little at removing the seal from the big drive sprocket, just to clean up it better, clean everything up and remove a lot of old dirt there. They seem to be in good condition. Lid on the motor that was cracked on mine. A little bit of oil came out of the motor. No big issue. Everything looks good. Put that cracked one back on there just for storage. More cleaning. The big lid on the outside of the reduction gearbox. At the machine, test fitted the not cracked lid. More cleaning up inside the gearbox. Loading up stuff. Oh, unloading. We're out by the machine here. At least there are no more bark beetles for the season, so the traps for that are put away for storage. Here we are trying to put a few of the items on the scale my dad borrowed just to get the weight of them, and everything is heavy. 450 on the motor. I think the sprocket here was like 90, the lid 70. So back at the machine, there it was a bit of mangled metal because of well, time and stuff there, and angle bar, just to see that there wasn't kind of an edge on there. Removed material until the surface was flat. Here you can see I put a few little plastic strips in there for the sprocket to land on. We ended up using an extension and some plastic because you needed to kind of lift that up a little later when you put the axle in place, and then you have the lid on there already. Taking care to not get any fingers in the way. Getting it in there, lifting it into place. Cleaning up the bolt holes. Lid, added some silicone to just ensure it's sealed properly. And the lid could go on there. It needed a little help and some leverage to get it up there and get the bolts to start lining up, but once we had a few lined up, it was just a matter of tightening things up. And then the axle had to go on there, and I missed a bit of video footage here, and it was a bit of tricky to get it on there. Then the sprocket needed to be kind of pushed back up there to get the axle in far enough, because there goes a lock ring that holds the sprocket in place. But it was not too hard, could get it on there. A few taps to get the lock ring to snap into place. With that lock ring in place, we could start getting the inner bearing in place. Some tapping, and it started moving in on the axle, and eventually it was on there good enough that we could get the lock washer on there, and then the nut holding everything together. Here it wanted to spin on us, so we couldn't really, well, we could kind of twist the outer part, but since there is no hydraulic motor in place, nothing stops it from spinning, so we will tighten this a little more when we have the big sprocket in place and can hold that. Did a test start to see that the motor was not leaking now that it had the new lid on it, and all looked fine. So continued with assembly. The sprocket on the motor. Here I took the sprocket that came from the donor machine, because both of them looked pretty much brand new. So that's nice. Here we tried to assemble the big drive sprocket, but ran into issues that the seal didn't want to stay in place. So we decided to put a little bit of silicone on it to hold it in place. Missed that, but put a wooden piece on there pushing it in place. Left it like this secure for a while, and I think we went to eat before we continued. With the seal properly held in place, the big sprocket could be put on there. These chain blocks are really nice too when you need to do small adjustments and get heavy things into place. Temporarily put the big bolt on the outside in place, had this tightened up and secured the lock ring. Then the lid on the inside could go into place. Here they had skipped one of the 4 bolts since before. So otherwise you need to remove that big ring that holds the motor to access the last bolt. So I think that had just been skipped in the past at some point. A plate and a few bolts securing the sprocket on the hydraulic motor. There's also a washer here, or a piece of metal that you fold in to make sure it can't come undone. Then started the struggle to push the motor back into place. But it wasn't too bad. With the cradle my dad had built and a little bit of a strap to help, because it wanted to kind of twist a little. I'm sure it was because of the hydraulic hoses or so. But once it started getting close, a big monkey wrench to help kind of twist the motor and start getting the holes to line up. Had a couple of longer bolts so we could get a few threads to start, and with a few of the bolts in place it was just a matter of tightening all of it up. Apparently I had tightened this a bit too hard temporarily, because I couldn't get it undone. Missed a little bit of video here. We added some silicone on this lid and bolt the washer also. And then we torqued it up. I think it should be up in the 800 Newton meter range, but we stayed at 560 for torque. If anyone knows the torque value for these bolts on a Poclain 90 CK, please drop a comment. My dad put a few markers with some white glue on there just to see if anything shifts, to have a visual reference. Also, it will probably be covered in dirt soon. The skid plate could be put back into place, and then it was time for the track again. Now it was easier because the machine was possible to help out also, so still we struggled a bit, especially getting it to climb over the upper wheel here. It caused us some issues, but eventually we got it back into place. It was so high up in the air that we decided to push it up and remove some of the material under it. But eventually it started getting dark, but we managed to get it into place and secure it and called it a night. Then it was a bunch of cleanup in the location we had ended up being. We ended up backing up a little to a better location because we had decided to do the same operation on the other side well, not take the hydraulic motor out, because no, well, it's weak on this side. We want to replace it with one of those spare motors, but so it was put up, scared my dad a little, because here the track came off a lot easier, a little too fast for comfort maybe. I'm not gonna cover going over this side, just a few, few small issues we had that were different compared to the other side. Here it had all four bolts on that small lid on the back side, and this big sprocket refused to come off the axle. We ended up using one of them sawzall and just cut the bolt and skipped that fourth bolt. And we started pushing it out, but then we realized that the lock ring in there had not been removed, and it cannot come all the way out without bringing the lid also, and that's what we had to do, since this big sprocket refused to come off the axle. Here all of the teeth on the axle were broken, and they had placed metal sheets, strips of metal I think on there, and kind of jammed it on there in place last time it was apart. So it was in need of an overhaul on this side also for sure. So that's it for now. Take care.